Hello, dear viewers. I am a global nationalist. I support nationalism in my country, India, and all over the globe. Today is the third Saturday of the month, and so I will be discussing, as per my schedule, nationalism in a South Asian country. Today, I want to discuss the South Asian country that's most in the news right now, which is Afghanistan. The what I'm going to talk about today is the conflict that is brewing, that is not just brewing, just has begun between the Taliban and the Afghan government. So before I begin with the current conflict, I'll give some background. Um, Afghanistan has is an old, very is an as a nation state is about 150 to 200 years old. However, it has been area that it has as a historical area. It has been its history goes back to more than 2,000 years in the past. Actually, probably even 5,000 years in the past, because the oldest settlements that have been discovered there were the Indus Valley civilization, which was there during the around the fourth millennium BCE. And so I for Afghan's history, I'll start with the 18th century. The 18th century, in the 18th century, Ahmed Shah Durrani uh, left the Persian Empire. No, wait. Established the Durrani Empire of in Afghanistan, which was the empire conquered all of the territory of Afghanistan, and he invaded India about three times, fighting both the Marathas and the Mughals, and even attacked Delhi. And he is he basically created began the formation of Afghanistan. Afghanistan basically before then was a mix of different tribes and ethnicities, but once the Durrani Empire was started, this was in um, the late 1700s and the 1780s or so. Once that was started, and um, and basically Afghanistan, the territory was united under one religion, Sunni Islam, which helped unite the different tribes that were living at that time. The most prominent of which was the Pashtuns, which I will get to later. And in Afghanistan, today, Ahmed Shah Durrani is considered the father of the nation. So that's how important this he and his empire was. In 1820, in the 1820s, the Durrani Empire declined and was overthrown by Dost Muhammad Shah, who established the excuse me, who established the Emirate of Afghanistan. Now, during this time, Afghanistan suffered economically because China had, due to diplomatic problems, China had stopped trading with them, and the Russian Empire had conquered the countries that were north of Afghanistan, and the Sikh Empire and the British India East India Company was ruling India at that time, and so Afghanistan was quite isolated and didn't have much uh, access to the outer world, which was a very rare for Afghanistan in its history. And however, even then, the country still remained united. Now, one important thing that happened during the period of Dost Muhammad Shah's reign was that the British became nervous about Russia's empire. They feared that Russia would invade and conquer Afghanistan and then from there take India from them. And the irony of imperialists being scared of another empire taking away their colony. Leave my Indian bias out of this for now. So, uh, back to what we were talking about. Yeah, so Afghanistan was invaded by the British during the middle of the 19th century. This was started the first Anglo-Afghan War. Um, the British defeated Dost Muhammad Shah and installed the former Durrani ruler, who was disliked throughout Afghanistan at that time, and his reign was very unpopular. However, the British themselves didn't face any great resistance from the Afghan people, and so most of their troops left, and only a few stayed back. However, those that did stay back were ambushed and almost wholly slaughtered by the Afghan people, and then they reinstalled Dost Muhammad Shah as the ruler of Afghanistan. This uh, was one of the causes that caused the Second Anglo-Afghan War in 1878 to which continued until 1880 when, and in this case, the British properly defeated Afghanistan and made them a protectorate. However, Afghanistan was still allowed to have self-rule for its internal affairs. However, for its external affairs, its foreign affairs, those were all controlled by the British. And during this time, the India, the colony of India, had been passed from the hands of the British East India Company to the British Crown itself. This happened after the 1857 War of Independence by Indians against the British. That's a separate story, just important to note. Um, so, back to what I was talking about. Now so that's basically the 19th century of Afghanistan for you. Until the 20th century, the Emirate of Afghanistan continued, and then in the 1920s it ended, and from then until the 1970s, I'm not very well read in what happened. Please forgive me. Uh, In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and this started the Soviet-Afghan War, which lasted until 1989. During this period, the US uh, wanted to expel the Soviets from Afghanistan, and so they created the Mujahideen, the which also was the part end, which was also included the Taliban. The U.S. made recruited them, and Pakistan also supported them at the same time. In fact, it was Pakistan that fed the Islamist ideology for them, and the U.S. supplied their weapons and finances. This Therefore, the Mujahideen fought against the Soviet Union, and eventually they were defeated and expelled from Afghanistan in 1989. Now, after the Soviets left Afghanistan, the US and rest of NATO did no longer gave any support to the Mujahideen and left. This caused Afghanistan to simply devolve into civil war, strife, turmoil, with several warlords gaining territory and fighting for power. And the Taliban were one of these groups, and they eventually became the most powerful and established control over the country in 1996 when they created the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan. This, as everyone knows, this regime was very oppressive, forced its religion, Islam, on non-Muslims, oppressed women, did not give them equal rights to men, did not allow them to be educated, excuse me, and yeah, and I don't know much about this period, so if I am, and what I do know comes from the Western media, so I understand that it would be biased against Taliban. So, however, one thing I do believe is that there was a lot of support amongst the Afghan people for the Taliban, that the Taliban, that their conservative ideology is actually shared by the many people of Afghanistan who don't support women's rights or gay rights at all or anything or democracy and support Sharia law. So then we know the rest that happened. Al Qaeda took set set up a base in Afghanistan under the patronage of the Taliban and did terrorist attacks. One the most famous of which was 9/11. The US under Bush invaded Afghanistan in 2001 because the Taliban wouldn't give up Al Qaeda. And for a while, it seemed that the US had completely defeated Afghanistan. Sorry, over the US had defeated Al Qaeda. They overthrew the Taliban and had elections, democratic elections, and a government was elected with an elected president. However, one thing that the US at first was ignorant of was that the Taliban had not and Al Qaeda had simply retreated to Pakistan, where they were sheltered. Only after I think a few years did the US come to realize this. However, the US couldn't take action against Pakistan because Afghanistan being a long landlocked country, they could only access it through Pakistan. So if they did pressure Pakistan or took any action against them, then Pakistan could simply not allow them access to Afghanistan. So yeah, and also of course that could have been overcome through diplomacy and maybe with some economic actions, maybe sanctions. Uh, but I think the US wasn't very interested because the military industrial complex was making a lot of money from this war and didn't want it to end, even though it became more and more pointless, especially after Osama bin Laden was killed. Then from 2014 onwards, the US troop level decreased, and in 2020, under President Trump, the US and the Taliban formed an agreement called the Doha Agreement, which declared that the US would withdraw all its troops and that the Taliban would not commit any terrorist attacks, and that the whole peace process would be led by Afghan led. Now, this is under Trump. Now, the problem occurred when President Biden. took office, and initially the initial promise made by Trump was that the U.S. would withdraw its troops from May on by May 1st. That all of its troops would be withdrawn. However, Biden extended that date to September 11th, at 20th anniversary, and I guess just to make himself look cool or something. It kind of doesn't make sense to me. And so the Taliban felt betrayed, as they should have, and attacked, and have now been attacking various parts of Afghanistan and conquering more territory. And now they've, with the support of Pakistan, and now China has come in support of them. Some reports are saying that China is supplying weapons to them. I'm not sure how true that is, but Pakistan is directly supporting them. They've warned the Afghan government and their armed air force not to come within 10 kilometers of the international border, or else they will fire air-to-air missiles against them. So the question remains, as a nationalist, what is the right thing for Afghanistan to do? I think that Afghanistan has, first of all, is that the most important thing is that this conflict is resolved between the Afghan people. Outside countries like Pakistan, China, even India and the US should not interfere. And however, the problem is that the Taliban is being supported by outside actors. Therefore, if they were to take power, then Afghanistan would be subservient to these countries because Taliban would owe them something and have to give them a pound of their flesh. So, however, the current Afghan government is not very popular in Afghanistan. It's considered as corrupt, ineffective, and weak, while the Taliban is seen as a very strong, disciplined religious group, and their army is much more uh, strong compared to the Afghan army, which is being defeated. Very and so I but however, I still think that the only nationalist solution to this is for the Taliban to stop fighting, to simply participate in elections, free and fair elections against the current ruling party of in Afghanistan, and see if they get the support of the Afghan people. If they do, they form the government. If not, then they have to simply wait till next elections. They cannot continue their violence. They cannot claim to have people's support. So, however, that is very unlikely. So, and most, I think right now, sadly, very unfortunate, most likely uh, outcome now is civil war. And in this civil war, I give my moral support to the Afghanistan government, which is a only legitimate government in Afghanistan. And I hope they can retake the territories seized by Taliban, and that they can establish some peace, some lasting peace in Afghanistan for the people of Afghanistan. So yes, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Vande Mataram.